welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your host, Madelyn.
Your what?
Bonsoir.
What am I forgetting?
That's the sound from Aiko.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Only I usually say croissant. Croissant.
Same difference.
That's what Aiko's all about. They're like, we're going to get a pastry.
We're going to get a pastry if it kills us.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel that way in the morning.
I'm your Leon host, Emma. Was that a good Leon?
That was a really good line delivery.
Thank you.
It's Emma's side quest this week on the show. So Emma, what's the sitch? What are we talking about?
This week I wanted to talk about like team ups in games and like cooperation. So it's not like all player character interactions, right? It's specifically thinking about like times when you as a player or various characters need to work together in some manner to accomplish something, and what that sort of how that sort of functions in the game, why we like it, why we don't like it, different forms of it, so on and so forth.
It's a very gaming unique thing.
Yeah. It's true.
We don't team up with robots very often.
No. Unless well, Bandersnatch isn't even there anymore, right? They took that off Netflix or whatever.
I'm not sure, but possibly.
I guess it's a little like when you're watching Peter Pan and they're like, please clap for Tinkerbell.
It's just like that. I'd never thought of them as NPCs in that moment, but you're totally right.
Yeah.
Well, the short Talk This answer as usual is, oh my god, how does anyone make a game?
Yeah.
That's the Madelyn answer. Again, as usual. I'm like, wow, how does anybody do this at all?
Yeah, when I really know nothing about programming, like, behavior for non-player controlled units, like, at all. And when I try to think about it, I want to stop. So, yeah, this will be a fun
I wasn't
one.
sure if you said I want to stop or I want to sob, but both
I said
like
stop,
accurate,
but
I think.
Yeah. Same sort of feeling there.
No, it's very complicated, and players want very complicated things that they probably can't correctly articulate.
Yes, very true. I feel like it's worth, like, so in reflecting on, like, the idea of the team up, I do think, like, there's, like, two discrete categories that falls under this sort of umbrella, but have very different, like, functions and implementation, one maybe being a little simpler than the other one, although complicated in different ways, I think, which is there's just sort of the straight up like attack sort of team up, right? And I feel like you could apply attack even to like if it wasn't like a violent game, like you take an action with another character.
Yes.
Right. And, you know, part of the reason I was thinking about this is I think it was on the last 6 weeks side quest, you were like, I'm trying to use synergy skills more.
Spoiler alert.
Because you told me to.
Hasn't happened. Because, Emma, here's the thing about synergy skills in Final Fantasy VII. This is not really relevant to what we're going to talk about, but I just need to defend myself here a little bit. Mm-hmm. Why must it be tied to blocking?
Well, so some of them are tied to blocking. Some of them are just in your menu.
Okay, yes. And I will use those ones.
Yeah.
But the ones that are tied to blocking, it's really foolish of anyone to think I'm ever going to block. You know? Like, I'm just not going to do that. That's not how I play this game. That's not how I play any game that feels like this.
I can't believe you don't want to launch Tifa into the air at any opportunity, though.
Look, I also don't like an attack that takes... This is another thing that needs to be balanced for me. If an attack takes a long time, I'm sort of on it.
What I usually did is I would activate it and then switch to the character that wasn't performing it after I saw it a few times.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah. Unless it was like the final strike or whatever.
Anyway, yeah, despite the fact that we're talking about team ups and I'm playing a game that has notable team ups, I won't do it. I don't believe in actually, yikes. Like, let's not. I don't believe in teamwork. Let's not think too hard about that.
Okay.
And how that impacts me in my professional life.
Sure, yeah.
I don't delegate to NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't as good as me.
Mm-hmm.
Better that I do it myself. Ha ha ha.
No, there are definitely some synergy skills that I didn't ever really figure out. Like, Cloud has some, like, they charge up his sword ones that I just couldn't be bothered to figure out the timing. But, like, there are some, like, guarding ones and launching ones that are handy to have, you know, in general. But the other one is I'm playing Trails into Reverie right now, right? In case anybody forgot.
Don't say right like that.
And it's had this developing link system since the first Cold Steel, where you have four active party members at a time in Cold Steel and the games in general, I believe. And you can have like two pairs essentially linked together. In the first game, this was mostly like if you can unbalance an enemy, you can perform like a follow-up attack with the other character. There's like 3 kinds of follow-up attacks based on how many you've built up. So there's the very basic one that doesn't cost anything, the more powerful one that costs a little bit, and the like everybody all-out attack persona style one that costs like all of your BP. And they've added more interesting parts to it as they've gone through. Like, so you get link experience with different characters based on how long you spend linked up, and in Reen's case, just by doing bonding events with them. And as you gain link level, you have like special abilities that activate while you are linked to that character. So based on like what type of unit it is, they have different ones. So there might be one that like guards against attacks for them, takes the hit for them. There might be ones that get really mad and charge up like their CP when their link partner gets hit. They might recharge their link partner's health or cure their status effects or cure their EP. If they cast an art, they might cast art support. Different characters have different combinations of this and therefore make them suitable for linking up with other different types of characters. So you can find like compatible pairs, essentially, to do this. And Reverie adds this thing called United Attacks also that uses a different resource that will use your entire party plus anyone you have in the back lines, and will also grant you more of the resource that you use to do the basic follow-up attacks in the links. So they finally managed to make it, like in Cold Steel 1, it was like, oh, I guess this is a thing that we do. By Cold Steel 3, it was like, okay, this is like useful now, like it's interesting. And then I feel like by Reverie, they finally reached like, okay, this is really cool. I'm really digging this system, which helps a little bit because there's some pairs that come together that are already very compatible, so it's very satisfying to see them work together. So that was the other inspiration for this, was just thinking about, I feel like Trails, out of the turn-based RPGs that I've played, has the most complex like link system in that way, in that there's the most now that we've gotten to Reverie, there's the most sort of strategy and satisfaction to it, right?
And how does it make you feel about those characters?
I do have preferences with who I link, both for story reasons and for, support reasons. And it does like build into like the overall strategy of your party. Like in Cold Steel 4, I think, whenever I had Kurt and Ash in a party, Kurt would give a lot of status effects to enemies that he hit, and Ash would do extra damage against status effect enemies. It was very much like, okay, I've got these two, how could it encourages you to think, I think, by adding this system, to all of its systems, it encourages you to think, okay, how is this character like supporting the other people that I've put in this party, right? How do they suit each other in this party composition that I've made? Which, also is more fun in Reverie because the menuing, they've added some quality of life to the menuing system. Like, I can just unequip a quartz from someone without having to go into their menu and unequip it from them. I can just equip it and it'll automatically take it off.
Oh, that's nice. That feels very 21st century.
Can you believe that it hasn't let you do that until Reverie?
No.
Like, all the other sort of attack examples that I had, like, Persona 5 Royal adds, like, Showtime attacks where you have pairs that can do, like, special moves together. You need, like, one of them in the party, and it's sort of just, it seems to just be a random chance, sort of, that it'll trigger at times. I think off of a baton pass, maybe. And they'll just do, like, a little special move with a little animation. But there's not, like, a lot of... It's a different priority, I guess. It's not really a strategic thing. It's a showmanship thing, those ones, right? So it's interesting to think of, like, the different functions that those serve.
Yeah, or like you mentioned, the combo heat moves in Yakuza 2. Yakuza as well.
Yes. Not just in Yakuza 2.
And yeah, those are like, they're cool. Like, it's cool when the guy throws you the stuff from the convenience store, but sometimes I'm like, you're right. Like, I'm like, oh no, I triggered this by mistake.
Yeah.
Or the summons too, right? Like, not quite the same thing, but it's like, oh, that was cool to watch once. Now let me never watch this ever again.
Well, the thing is, you can skip them in the turn-based
Yes, no, I know
ones.
that.
You can't skip the heat move in the action one, which is, I think, why it feels like so, like, long to me playing Pirate Yakuza, because my last experience was Infinite Wealth, right? And that took so long and has embedded itself into my brain. So, like, you can choose to trigger various team attacks in that, right? In Infinite Wealth, but you can skip most of that animation after, you can watch it the first time and go, oh, cool, and then you can skip it most of the other times. Which is also the case for, like, Trails, and F7R gets around it by you can usually switch to your remaining party member if you really don't want to watch it. And also those just aren't as long as the pair heat moves in Yakuza to begin with. But in this one, like, whenever I get a heat move and it's like, oh, it's with one of my buddies. Like, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, that's cool. Wow, we're cool. Guys rule. Whatever. Guys rock. But now I get it. I'm like, oh, this one's so long.
Do you feel that way about friendship in general?
My friendship does not usually involve, like, kicking and punching guys between us. Right?
Not usually.
So, I don't know. If that took a long time, maybe. Yeah.
So did you talk about the other? I can't remember if you got to there. Like, there are two different kinds of this.
No, I think I just got in a tangent about attacks. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's one of them. And the other one was the one we were sort of talking about more when we started, which is, like, sort of the escort, sort of. It's not always an escort, but it tends to often be.
Well, it's like, are they helping you or are you helping them? I think.
Yes, it's more like support of sorts. Which, of course, as our little improvisations at the start, includes things like Ico and Resident Evil 4, and not included in our improv, but like Little Nightmares 2, where you have a character that you're controlling, and then there's another character that you have to sort of sometimes lead around, sometimes work with, sometimes protect, sometimes follow, and has sort of cooperate with them throughout major sections of those games.
And both of these things, just impossible to get right. Escort characters obviously get a bad rap.
Yes.
Because we don't like when AI is stupid.
Yep. Or slow.
Except in Ico, when we do like it. I think Ico is such an interesting, like, weird counterexample to, like, everything that you learn from every other example that we will talk about in this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like, the whole point of that game is, like, it's really kind of annoying to have to lead her around. You know, like, and not, like, in the way that, like, intentionally so.
Yeah.
Like, you must keep going back and pressing the button, and, like, she keeps falling and whatever. And it's, like, so interesting to me that, like, anything even remotely approaching that in, like, Resident Evil would be like, this is horrible. And meanwhile in Ico, it's like, this is the most beautiful game design decision that has ever been made.
Yeah, so I think we've talked about Ico on the show, but it's certainly been a while.
It has been a long time, but we have talked about it at some point.
So Ico is, I think, the first of Ueda, who also made Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian, and is making some sort of mech game now. It's his first game, first major game as, like, a director, I believe. Yep. And you play as a little horned boy in a castle, and you stumble upon this sort of ethereal girl, very white in color, who is also entrapped there, and you're just trying to sort of escape, right? That's sort of the basic setup. But a lot of it is just you're leading the girl Yorda around by the hand. There are puzzles you have to solve. There are, like, shadow monsters that sometimes come and try to drag her back away from you. And so you have to sort of figure out progress while making sure that she is safe and that she's coming with you. There are certain places, like, you need her in order to open doors and stuff, right? So she can sometimes help you with progress as well, but really most of it is, like, you're holding her hand and sort of pulling her along the ride. There are a couple interviews with Ueda that I found where he talked about, like, when he was making it, people were really into, like, AI in the sense of, like, NPC AI.
Yeah, we probably won't talk about this too much, but obviously there's a lot of, like, gross AI stuff that's starting to put its fingers into this space that I don't think will make good games.
Yes. And he talks about, like, a lot of AI characters back then were mostly about, like, taking orders from the player outside of the game. And the holding hand mechanic was a sort of idea that was more of a direct communication between the characters in game, right? Like, the boy that you are controlling must also do something to interact with Yorda. You're not just saying, Yorda, come on, press X button to get Yorda to follow you, you know. You have to go over to her. Your character has to hold her hand, and then you have to walk together. So that it made it feel, like, a little more tangible. Apparently there were various problems with actually implementing this, and he thought he would have to, like, ditch it for a while, but eventually someone figured it out, and he could do what he wanted.
Shout out to that guy.
There's also a very, like, famous part of it where it seems like you're on the verge of escape from this castle, but the bridge starts splitting with the boy on the side of freedom and Yorda left behind on the side of the castle. And you are in control in this point. And what you're supposed to do is jump across the bridge and catch onto Yorda's hand. That was, like, the intention, right, of this scene. But it is putting the player in control, right, which is always very risky. So I did like in this sort of, it was on shmuplations.com/Aiko. Shmuplations. From like some sort of event where he and Keiichiro, the Silent Hill guy, the Slitterhead guy, Toyama, were talking about their favorite scenes from Aiko. And his was this one. And so he wanted to leave it up to the player and hoped that everybody would try to jump. And in fact, from the response, most people were like, yeah, I jumped. Like, immediately.
Yeah.
Which, like, what a success of player psychology, this scene, right?
Especially, it's not like the game is like, press X to jump now.
No, yeah. I mean, you're used to going for Yorda and taking care of Yorda by this point and holding on to her, right? So it's just hoping that the game has conditioned you to do that, right? And
yeah,
in most of the time it successfully has, which just very crazily impressive for a game that's entirely like an escort mission up to that point.
Gamers hate that.
I do think there is a little bit of a difference between like a game that has an escort mission and a game that is an escort mission, for what it's worth. So there is a little bit of that, right?
I can't think of too many other games that, like, there are other games that are on the face of them escort missions in this same way. Like, The Last of Us is, like, very transparently an escort mission. Like,
well, even in narrative, technically,
that's what I'm saying.
He's escorting her.
Narratively, it is an escort mission. But, like, dear God, if that game treated Ellie as, like, an escort character, that would be the worst. Every once in a while, she already will do something stupid and, like, somehow get spotted. But, like, mostly the game does not treat that as possible, and, like, thank God for it.
Yeah. I think Aiko can get a little bit away, like, narratively with the, like, I'm dragging this girl around mechanic, too, in a way that maybe something like The Last of Us would be like, what are we doing here? Just because of difference in, like, aesthetic, right? Aiko is very sort of fairy tale-esque.
Yeah. No, it's true. I do feel like we were talking about this and I was like, okay, like, I get something about how this is similar to, like, what we like in games, right? Like, we do like when these NPC type characters sort of subvert our expectations a little bit, right? And I feel like that's the, like, if the cardinal sin of a team up or a companion character type thing in a game is this character has screwed something up for me in a way that I could not control and in a way that is not necessarily narratively consistent, I would actually love to see a game that, like, had sort of an intentionally bumbling companion character. And I think in some ways, like, not bumbling, but, like, Aiko sort of does that. Yeah. Right? Like, she is sort of helpless and the game treats her as helpless. And so, like, that's why we like it, because she behaves consistently with how we expect that character should behave and, like, mechanically with how we expect that character should behave. But, like, so, like, the worst possible thing that a character can do is, like, make your life harder. Not make your life harder, but, like, screw things up. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, I saw a few characters get shouted out for, like, they use your items. Like, you can't stop them from using your items. And that to me is just like, that's bad. Right? If the character is, it's bad when a character uses your items. You can't give items to Donald Duck and Goofy, right? They'll use them. They don't know that items are to be hoarded. They don't know.
You do give it to them before boss fights, but only then.
That's it, though. Only then, at a carefully chosen selection.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they don't understand. The NPCs don't understand that items aren't for using; they are for carrying around in case you ever need them.
Again,
so
I feel
bad.
like there's narrative potential to, like, a companion using your items without telling you, but, like, in an exception that proves the rule kind of way, you know?
Yeah, no, but that's what I mean. It's like I would be interested in a game that, like, tried to intentionally create a character around these things that we don't like. when our like assistant characters or our team up characters do, right? That would be interesting. Somebody be brave enough to do this. There's no mashup this week, obviously, but like that's the mashup. Stupid companion character. Claptrap could do that, I think. But like the best thing, the great thing is when the character does something that is good, but also that like we don't expect. And whether that's because they are smarter than we expect the character to be, like as a computer brain, right? Like it's cool when okay, this is a combo of the two, right? But it's cool when Donald heals you at the right time.
Yeah, so true.
It's like the reason that's cool is because mostly he doesn't. So that's a bad example because it sort of comes out of this, oh, like, haha, like mostly it's bad. That's this weird, unexpected good thing. But, you know, you could when it's like, oh, like the character like used like the smart item to use here, or they like grabbed an enemy and did something cool with it, or like invited you to team up attack in a way you wouldn't. Like when they're smarter than you expect, there's one thing, or when they just do something that's like, oh, like that's an unexpected way. Like you mentioned when, you know, throughout The Last of Us, you're like boosting Ellie up ridges, right?
Yeah, ridges. All the ridges of The Last of Us.
Sorry, that was not the right word. Boosting her up to elevated platforms.
Yes, exactly.
Jagged, broken stairwells, whatever. And when she doesn't, right, when that expectation is subverted for like a character moment, that's sort of interesting and exciting.
Yeah, like, I really do think there's something to like, there's times when the programmed character will trick you into thinking that they're human, right?
Yeah.
And just sort of reflecting on Aiko versus some of the examples we'll talk about, I think that actually comes more from like consistency. Like, you have to yank Yorda around and take care of her and stuff, right? But she never like you were saying, she doesn't really act in ways that are dumb, in that like she does the same thing, right? Or like in comparison, I was reflecting on this when I was thinking about like the Showtime attacks in Persona 5 Royal. So in the original Persona 3, in the original Persona 3 and in Persona 3 FES, the one they released like a year afterwards, but not in Persona 3 Portable or Persona 3 Reload, the other two Persona 3s.
Oh, good.
But in the ones that were on the PlayStation 2, there is no manual control over your party members. Mm-hmm. So like in Persona 5, right, there's technically a tactics menu, and you can set it to like tell party members to act on their own in certain ways, but who doesn't just automatically say direct control and then forget that menu ever exists, right?
Yeah.
Persona 3 FES is very much about using the tactics menu to suggest to your party members the types of actions that they should be taking, right? And this can be frustrating if they will not do something for you that you think they should be doing, right? If they won't, if Mitsuru casts Marin Karin instead of healing you, right? Or Akihiko again tries an element that you know that the boss is immune to already, right? Or any number of other things to that effect. And that's because when they do that, they don't feel like characters making mistakes. They feel like the computer being dumb.
No, yeah, they feel like somebody rolling a little cup of dice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a brain. It's just rolling the dice.
So when you're designing AI, you have to be able to make it smart and responsive enough that it doesn't feel like the computer being dumb, right? Because I feel like we tend to attribute good decisions more to like the characters helping me, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying with Donald, when Donald heals you at the right time, it's like, Donald, I love you.
Yeah.
Right? Versus when he doesn't, it's more like, why did the computer do that sometimes, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, I think that it has become such a meme about Donald Duck that I think it has transcended some of that, like the computer. But yes, you're correct.
And I feel like the solution to that a lot of the time to make them feel like more like a person is to make them smarter. And Yorda is kind of the exception to that, but she still behaves in a way that feels consistent, right? Like she is in control, quote unquote, of what she's doing. So even without making her like more capable, she still feels not like the computer is doing it to you.
Yeah, no, she's not trying to do that much.
Yeah. Which I feel like is an interesting point of comparison to like Resident Evil 4's changes to Ashley in the remake.
Say more.
Well, Ashley in the original Resident Evil 4 is, at least in the sort of online meme community, greater sort of cultural consensus, very annoying to take care of. There's a lot of like, please go into the garbage, Ashley, while I do stuff, right? Like she'll just run into danger sometimes, right? I say please go into the garbage. I think that is something you can tell her to do in the original one. I'm not just saying like she should be trash or whatever. You know, she'll scream for you a lot when something goes wrong, you know, hence the sort of Leon meme, right? You have to catch her all the time. Like she can't climb ladders in the original, so you have to catch her from high surfaces all the time. Stuff like that. And so,
quick question before we
go ahead.
If you were Ashley in this situation,
would I make Leon Kennedy catch me from all of great heights all the time?
Well, just how different do you think your behavior would be? Like, how often do you think you would accidentally run into danger?
I mean, yeah, plenty of times.
You know? Anyway, sorry. That just came to me.
I
don't know.
I would climb the ladders. I do believe, for what it's worth. So Ashley in Remake is a little bit more, I guess, both present but also proactive. Mm-hmm. There's less scenarios when you can tell her to just hide in a locker, which I think you do a lot in the original. I think they left in like 1 or 2 situations where you can tell her to hide in the locker for a while. But enemies can still find her there, so that can backfire on you. So she's always, when she's with you, she's either like really close, you can tell her to be really close behind you, or to be back behind you a little bit more to give you some space. So between those 2 commands, you can sort of manage what she's doing based on the combat scenario. She will generally avoid things, right? If you're being really erratic, you might end up shooting her, but that's probably your fault, honestly. Mm-hmm. She can drive a forklift in this one. There's a battle where she's forklifting while you're fighting some guys. So
would you do that?
I'm not forklift certified like apparently she is, so I guess not.
Fair enough.
There's I think there's a playable Ashley section in the original, but it's much more expanded in Remake, where she has to get Leon out of a cage and sort of proactively do things by herself, right? So a lot of their solution to, as I was saying, a lot of their solution to people finding Ashley annoying was to make her more smart, quote unquote, I guess.
Like useful, right?
Useful. Yeah, that's a better way to put it, was to make her more useful to you. Which is, I think, interesting. There's something to be said for like the AI character being more useful to you, making them feel more like human, I guess.
Yikes. Oh, yikes. Oh, this episode is like pressing the like Madelyn's deep. Should probably talk to a therapist about this buttons, isn't it? Yikes. That made me think of something interesting. You brought up Persona 3, and you mentioned in the notes for this episode sort of the, is there a way, is it even possible to have a turn-based combat system where you aren't controlling all the characters and have that feel good, right? Like, of course you can like opt into that, right? If you're lazy, I guess. But is it even possible to create a turn-based system where like you are controlling you, but your party members are just like doing their own thing? And my initial impulse was to say, I don't think so. Partially because we are so used to, it's just like we're so used to it at this point that I think it would be hard to do. And I think that holds regardless of anything else that I say, right? Mm-hmm. I think you're right that it's challenging to ever make a computer that is going to walk the correct line between being smart enough that they aren't frustrating and not so smart that they don't make it fun to play. Mm-hmm. However, something I was just thinking about is something I would be interested to see a game play around with, right? So like think about being in a battle with a demon for real. We've all been there, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happened to all of us at one point or another. You and like a couple of your close friends and a couple of randos are in like a battle with a demon. And as is the rules of engagement, you must attack this demon in an organized, orderly, turn-based manner. All good? Great. Seems like in this situation, communication might be important, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if, like, does Joker see all the, like, HUD icons that we see? He probably does. But, like, maybe not all turn-based characters do.
Yeah.
Right? So if I, as, like, turn-based character number 1, notice that the ice monster is weak to fire, okay, that's one thing. The character should be smart enough to look at an enemy made of ice and be like, that's probably weak to fire.
Yeah.
Right? So that's separate. But if I discover that this, like, random enemy that we're fighting is weak to my fire spell, it's possible that my other companions didn't notice that. Right?
Yeah.
Whether because they don't get the little super effective pop-up,
or they're just busy. Right?
Yeah. They're, like, looking at something else. They're prepping. They're, like, prepping their big attack, right?
Right.
So there could be something interesting too. We're very used to in kind of an action-adventure companion concept, the idea that we can give, if not commands, like advice to those characters, right? We can be like, stay back, right? Mm-hmm. Or that sort of thing. Might be interesting. I think one way you could play around with the you can't control everyone in your turn-based party idea is if part of the mechanic was that when you discover something, you have to like make a choice to communicate it to those characters that you're playing with. And that would solve to some extent, and hopefully they can figure out some things on their own and also communicate them to you. That would be neat, and I think would make them feel human. But I think it would also solve a chunk of the issue of the AI just can't ever play like you can. And you also wouldn't exactly want it to, even if, assuming that you're good at the game, you probably wouldn't want the AI to play as well as you do either. So I'd be interested in that. I'd be interested in something that's like, let's take some of the horrible coding out of this. I'm sure there's still horrible coding to be done. And instead, like, you actually have to work together in the way you would on the battlefield, where you'd yell out, hey, Bulbasaur's weak to fire, right?
Yeah.
So that's my proposal.
That does remind me of a few things. One, I hadn't thought about this beforehand, but there is that part in Deltarune episode 1 where Susie's like in your party, right? But will just attack by herself.
Yeah.
And so some of your interaction during that part is like warning the enemies, like, hey, I can't control this lady, yeah. Okay?
Actually, I will call out that it's often a red flag when you can't control a character, right? Like, if I can't control Sephiroth, like, maybe that means something.
You can't take Sephiroth's material off.
That's separate, but yeah.
He's really picky, that's it. He just doesn't want. He's got his perfect setup.
You don't share.
Doesn't need fixing. Nothing sinister there. And the other one is, I believe, in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, the Ike ones. When you have allied units on the field, there is a mechanic in those where you can provide, well, allied units being like the green units, right? There is a mechanic, I believe, where you can like order them to either advance or stop or go to a certain spot. Which is a little bit different than like direct controlling your own army in an interesting way.
Yeah.
But keeps it from like they go kill the boss while you're not looking.
That would be cool though. I like the concept of like this could be character driven, right? I mean, in some ways this is me just being like, hey, you know how when you've got a Pokemon that's too high level and it like won't listen to you?
Mm-hmm.
But with an army, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm interested in the idea of like a Fire Emblem type strategy game where, you know, like one of the characters does not think that you are a better commander.
Yeah.
Right? And you can give them some orders, but they might not follow you, and there's like story ways that you might adjust that. That's interesting to me. It's interesting to me. I actually think as a game it would suck.
Yeah.
That's the problem with some of these ideas, is like that actually sounds really cool mechanically. I think if you actually did that, I would not want it to work like that.
Yeah, it does feel like something that would be hard to sustain over a whole game. It feels like a sort of like event battle situation.
Yeah. Agreed.
Sometimes you also have, you know, a companion that fights with you. Like Resident Evil 4, Ashley is the one that is with you the most. But there's certain times when you don't have Ashley and instead are with Luis, who's, you know, a man with a gun, rather than a helpless college girl who needs you to help her. And it's interesting to sort of compare contrast of like, he still needs to feel, like Luis needs to feel helpful in different ways than Ashley does, right? So usually what I remember is mostly like if an enemy grabs you while he's there, he can shoot it off you. So you don't have to like grapple or waste your knife durability to get it off. Although it's sort of a gamble sometimes. It's like, are you gonna shoot it? Or like, you know, you can set each other up for melee attacks by stunning enemies and, you know, either take it or let Luis do it. And I don't think he can die the same way Ashley can die, which is also like interesting, right? Like I guess he's healing himself, right? He's eating the herbs by himself or whatever.
That's smart of him.
He could share when I die, you know.
Nah, he's got to eat the herb.
I feel like I guess it's sort of like that's more of like a The Last of Us sort of situation with Ellie once she gets a gun.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever, any other of the party members that you have.
I guess
those
she
games.
like doesn't really help though.
Well then, like
she does help. But I'm just thinking like
setting that aside, the AI is not great in the first The Last of
Yeah.
Us. I feel like that's well known in terms of like combat scenarios. But you said like Jesse in The Last of Us 2.
Jesse's the best. I gotta say it. There's one, I'm sure I talked about this on the podcast when I played this game a couple of years ago. But yeah, there's like one segment where I was just like, I was out of items, like I had nothing. And I was just like, all right, like we're running. And like Jesse like appears in like a car, right? Or something at some point. And I felt a pure rush of joy and friendship. at that moment. I was like, I was like sprinting. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna make it through this. I have like almost no ammo. I have no healing items. I'm down to like, if I take another hit, I'm dead. And I'm just like, so I'm like, all right, guess we're running. And then this man picks me up, and I'm like, this is it. This is the peak of game NPC friendship relations here.
Yeah. But I do feel like the sort of shooter buddy in the third-person shooter is kind of less notable. There's a lot more of them, I feel like. I guess you could go into like, I think you can like throw Atreus around a little more in God of War. But yeah. Or tell him to shoot arrows or something.
That's like an extension of you, though.
Yeah. As are all children.
Whoa.
No, I think that's maybe part of the moral of God of War, actually.
Whoa.
That he's not an extension of Kratos.
Mechanically not supported. I have to talk about Marvel Rivals again, because I like saying it.
Sure.
So it has team-up attacks, right? Like we talked about that, the fastball special, etc. on the show. And it was interesting to me. I was reading like one, it was like Gamrant or whatever. So like very, sorry, like clickbaity article. But it made me think. I was like, a very SEO bait article. How about that? It was interesting to me to think about, you know, online gaming now is all about like the little buffs and little nerfs to characters and balancing and whatever. And it was cool to think about the possibility they've set up for themselves with that game where you have these team-up attacks that are pretty powerful and significant, right? And, you know, even if, whatever, Wolverine sucks as a character, I don't know anything about the meta in Marvel Rivals, right?
The shark guy's good, right? Shark baby? Shark? Jeff the Shark?
Jeff the Shark. You got there. Even if Jeff the Shark sucks, he doesn't. He's eating you alive.
Yeah.
And good for him. Get good, non-shark gamers. But it's interesting to think about how you can incentivize players to like play different characters that they might not otherwise, or work together in different ways based on how the characters work together. Which is not how I would think of usually being like, who am I gonna main in an online fighting game?
Yeah, there's like a whole other conversation to be had about like cooperative multiplayer, I guess.
Certainly is.
That's, I think, a little more straightforward than this one, right? Teamwork's good. Cooperation's good. We should take care of our fellow man. You know, lots of overarching lessons in cooperative play. You know, we all play soccer. All of us. Every single one of us play soccer.
I got tempted to sign up for an indoor league.
You should.
There's one like 5 minutes away. But
you should.
I don't like indoor really.
Well, it won't be cold though, or hot.
I know, and I don't have to have cleats.
And you don't have to have cleats.
I think I already missed this. Well, whatever. Anyway, I was actually thinking about this the other day.
But I feel like even when you know, there's exceptions to this. If you're playing with someone without voice chat, I think there's like a danger of being like, well, obviously there's danger of being like, it's a bot, NPC, right? But if you're playing like with your friends and one of your friends messes up, that's a little different in terms of like the follow-up conversation than when your AI controlled party member messes up, right?
Yes, there's a mutual understanding to some
Right.
extent, or at least a potential ability to communicate that a mistake has been made.
Yes, the person can go, oh, you know. Yeah. I hit myself on the head when I did that. You can imagine the motion that would be made. In a way that like when your computer controlled party member is never going to come out of the fight and be like, I sucked.
Yeah.
Or at least not in any game that I've played.
Well, and not in any game where it would mean anything, right?
Like, I fricked up. I know I shouldn't have used that move, and I just panicked, right? Like, they're not gonna say that. They're not gonna acknowledge that. They're not even really, they're gonna not really even acknowledge if they do, like, really great, right? There's less, like, understanding of their own actions, obviously, because they're not real.
Yeah. Except when they are.
Except when they are, of course.
When they're good, they're real.
And this is not an invitation to be like, the language learning models will save us.
It's not, and they won't.
They'll just be wordier versions of the same issues, I feel like.
Them talking more and in more awkward ways will not save us.
Yeah. I think the last escort one that I put down as examples, just to hit it before we're done, was Little Nightmares 2 has one where, with the holding hands mechanic sometimes too. You have to hold hands sometimes.
That's peak. Sorry.
Holding hands is kind of peak.
More games should be just in life. But like, Emma disagrees, I know. But like, if you take one thing away from this episode of Talk This, it's that holding hands is peak.
Yeah. I love pressing a button to hold hands.
Yeah.
But, you know, Little Nightmares 2 is interesting because it's more of a, well, it's sort of like Ico, right? I feel like you can see a lot of it's more overtly horror.
Yeah.
Right? But you're both sort of, and I feel like you're both a little bit more helpless in Little Nightmares, right? You're sort of on an equal level of sort of being kind of helpless.
Yeah.
But it's interesting of like, there are puzzles that you have to solve together, and Six, the character that's with you has to be able to recognize like when you are interacting with a puzzle and go do her thing without necessarily giving away the solution to the puzzle, right? Which is like an interesting, I was surprised I couldn't find more of them like talking about it, because it felt to me like watching some of it that like it must have been a really sort of difficult system to put together. But
all I could find, people want to cry when they hear that.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear that.
But all I could find was like one Xbox interview with the lead producer just talking about allowing for more complex level design, essentially. And like taking control, like making her a little bit more mysterious than just like having co-op would, right?
Yeah.
Of like being unsure sort of what she's going to do and trying to communicate, even though neither of these characters like talk out loud, right?
Yep.
So it's an interesting sort of balancing thing to walk, I think, especially when you're dealing with like puzzles. Yorda and Aiko, in the remastered version that came over, I think the original North American release didn't have this, but will sometimes like be like point, be like, or look at something and be like, that's something as well. Although, so it's helping you with the puzzle solving, although in a less direct way than like something like Little Nightmares too.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. In a more subtle way, I guess, of doing it than, with all the father, we should just shoot the thing there, you know?
Yeah. Well, if you've taken anything away from this podcast this week, folks, we believe in good communication, subtle communication, though.
Yeah.
And holding hands.
Yep. That's what we believe.
And friendship that's about how useful you are to the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes you more real to them. Anyway, on that note, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Do you have favorite game companions or team up moves? I can't believe I have to do this for Dad from X-Men Legends.
Combo.
That's really what you need from a team up move. A good sound effect.
Yeah, true.
That's one that I would incentivize. Like those are good because you get to hear him say, oh, I can't even remember. Savage Rampage.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. It's pretty good. Do you think that your friends should be quantified by their usefulness to you, except when you're holding hands? Do you sometimes say the word croissant to yourself in a little French accent like you're in ICO? Because they're really just looking for pastries.
Mm-hmm.
Should all games be about looking for pastries? If you have thoughts about this or anything else that we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring lots of gaming blog content of various kinds and non-gaming blog content. Lots of stuff. We have 2 games, and if you want to make sure that do you know them?
I know them.
Next week we're talking about 2 games.
Ninja
One of them is
Gaiden
Avowed.
And Ninja Gaiden and Avowed.
Right. So if you want to make sure you don't miss that, you should subscribe to the show. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Talk This. Yes, that's what we're talking about. Next week, in 2 weeks, it's 6 weeks in gaming, which, dear God, means that I had better get gaming.
It's okay. We can make the whole thing the Reverie Report. I'm sure that's what the listeners want.
Dear God, I've got to get gaming. That's all we've got. Emma, send them out.
This week, I hope that you're led by the hand to wherever you need to go.